All right. You know what it is. You know who it is. We are back with season 3 of the
For
BG
those listening,
Perform
that was a
podcast.
14-second pause in the beginning. They're going
We
to
are
be like,
back with
what
season
happened?
3 of the BG Perform podcast with my co-host, Coach Gerald Hayes. Jerry,
What's up?
had a lot of travel recently.
Yep.
Just
Went home
getting
to
back.
New York for a wedding. Fast turnover. Kind of get there, rehearsal dinner, then the wedding. Next day, you leave. I got like 2 hours of sleep the night of the wedding into my morning of the flight. So it was just brutal on recovery. But, we made it. We're working on sleeping and kind of catching up still, unfortunately, on Wednesday. But it is what it is. It was a fun time. It was worth it. Sometimes you got to get a little less sleep just to travel. So
That's why they made White Monster.
exactly. That's me. The
Yeah.
white monster.
When you get 2 hours or less of sleep, just have a White Monster and everything feels like normal again. Feels like you got 8 hours.
I saw somebody made a fountain with a white monster can, and it was pouring over rocks, and like it was lit up like it was in a fancy restaurant or something.
Awesome.
We
Beautiful.
need that.
All right, so travel is good.
Yeah. Travel's good.
Yeah, we're back. We're back with season 3. The theme of this month, or this season, I should say, is going to be more focused towards strength conditioning. Just some of the overlapping themes you're going to hear. We're going to be talking today about the coach's role in an athlete's career. And we're going to be talking a little bit into the difference between like training an athlete and GPP, what the difference between off camp and in camp looks like. We have a couple different specific like S&C topics that we're going to discuss in regards to like youth training, warm-ups and recovery, because it's a little bit different, lessons that I've taken from training some of the best athletes in the fight game and in general, mistakes coaches make and whatnot. So there's going to be a lot of stuff we're going to discuss and really bridge the gap between high level elite S&C training and how we can bring that into the everyday person's life and what principles still kind of like carry over. And then also like what those differences are in those high level athletes and how we can actually explain that to you. So if you are a coach, you can kind of implement this stuff to improve your coaching career. And if you're a client, you can kind of take some of these things and implement them yourself. If you're a fighter or an athlete of some kind getting ready for a competition, there's going to be a lot of like tidbits and little things like that that you can take away to improve your training. So yeah, we're going to dive in today with the main topic being what is the coach's role in an athlete's career, specifically like obviously the strength conditioning coach. I think before we dive into that, I have had a lot of experiences, obviously, as a strength conditioning coach and a lot of different capacities. And, I've had it where I'm obviously just training people and I that's it. I've had it where I'm living with somebody. I've had it where I'm traveling the world with somebody. I've had it where I'm online with somebody. And all of them provide different opportunities for me and experiences. So I'm really excited to dive into this because this is a topic that I think is really important. And I want to give you a second to talk and add some stuff to it. But I think this is really important because I really think S&C is I don't want to say a slippery slope because it's not like a bad thing, but I think it's one of those things where it can very easily get off track. And I think we see that in the way that S&C coaches post on Instagram and kind of what the big things are on social media and kind of what clicks and whatnot. But I think the coach's role is like really important in defining that and understanding like what are you supposed to do, because a lot of people want to get in front of athletes or they want to have that opportunity. And I think what we're going to talk about today is what's going to get you in front of those athletes and what's going to get you further in your career and actually get like real results with these people. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that the main thing that people are going to notice is one of the biggest roles of strength and conditioning coaches is literally to just make sure your athletes are feeling optimal and your game plan revolves a lot around what they're doing in their sport more so than what they should be doing based on theory. So it's going to be cool to dive into it and see and talk about how we make changes to programming and sessions based on where they're at too.
Yeah, so I'm gonna dive in first. Obviously, I kind of just touched on it, but like my experience inside of the role of strength conditioning with some of these athletes has been like, you know, I've had so many different uh, roles that I've been in, and most recently where I was traveling with somebody, like literally living with the person, and you know, I found in that role was and really kind of like matured in this position because I was like with someone all the time. So I got to see everything that they were doing, which was really helpful. And it really gave me a good idea on how I could improve performance in a lot of ways. And I think that, you know, what I found is that like my role with athletes was kind of what Jerry just said. It was basically fitting myself into what they needed. Right. And I think it's, you know, specifically with the guy I was working with, Ian, he was someone who, you know, had a different game plan, you know, had a different lifestyle. Obviously, it was very different from the lifestyle that we were living with a lot of these other fighters, where, you know, a lot of these other fighters were based in one place. They had the same schedule. They did the same things. Ian didn't. So we were traveling a lot. We were going place to place. I was adjusting a lot of my schedule to fit around his, making sure that his training was obviously the priority because, you know, otherwise none of it was going to work if it wasn't. And the goal really was just to keep him healthy and keep him moving and make sure that when we had all these changes, everything was kind of centered around what he needed and how he was going to perform the best. And I think this is something I've always thought about for a long time, and I've tried to implement inside of like what I do as a coach is, you know, you need to place yourself in their shoes and see like how can I best fit in to what they need, because I think a lot of the times we I don't want to say we overvalue what we do, because I don't think that's like the right way to put it, but I think we have to kind of take just a step back and realize that while we have an idea of what we want, it's going to change based on the individual in front of us. And I've had so many different athletes from, you know, Ian to Paul, you know, Amanda, Charles, Dustin, even Jocko, someone like that, something like Jarzinho, Ariani, like all these people are just like completely different individuals, body types, personalities, goals, and you see the difference in that when you're having these conversations. And I think that the biggest thing to just kind of understand, and what I'm trying to get at here, is there is no like one size fits all answer of what the S&C coach is going to be. But there is a framework to follow of what do they need, what type of personality do they need, what type of energy do they need, and that's kind of your role, is to just fit into it. And you can be that coach who's, you know, just that one trick pony, who's either just the high energy or whatever. But if you want to be successful and you want to have an array of clients, you need to be able to kind of like fit yourself in and do what's needed at the time it's needed.
Yeah, I think so. Brandon and I have a slightly different experience. I know that you've done small group stuff and you've done group.
Yeah, with
training,
athletes,
strength
I did
conditioning.
not for like a very long period of time, but I did a lot of like group stuff with the fighters. It wasn't my favorite, but it was something I have experience with. But go ahead.
Yeah, so Brandon, excuse me, I can't seem to clear my throat today.
Neither can I. I was just saying that.
What the heck? Brandon's experience, while he has worked with a lot of like the small group stuff and some group stuff with fighters, is very much individualized and an individual base. So it's almost like strength and conditioning in a personal training setting or small group setting, where for me, my entry into strength and conditioning was larger groups, full teams coming in. So you have anywhere from like 11 to 20 guys in a weight room or girls in a weight room. And one of the key differences between those is you have to have obviously you have to have the eye for it. And when you have an individual person in front of you, you can really pay attention, their mannerisms, the way they're walking, the way they breathe in between sets, like we've talked about in the past season. But on top of that, it's almost like you pick up on their mannerisms and you know them really well. And as a team, you can almost see how teams interact with each other and how they walk in the door. Sometimes if they walk in the door, morale may be low from a recent loss, all these things that they kind of pick up on each other's fatigue, emotions, and everything. So going into how you treat a session where half the team might be feeling like they're like fired up, ready to go, and the other half is kind of dead. That's where there's a little more of a trickiness to how you structure your sessions, but it comes together in the same way. Like there are ways to tell how your team or individual is doing, and when you make these changes, you really have to step back and look from like an outside perspective of sometimes when you're in the moment, you don't really see it. You're just like, all right, well, they're 5 games in. They had 2 back-to-backs this weekend, but they seem pretty fresh. Sometimes seeming pretty fresh coming in isn't pretty fresh. So making changes on the fly is important. And then one other thing I'll add is that while you may be working in a group setting or individual setting, those changes can happen mid-session, the beginning, at the end. You could even like see something like, okay, maybe we did too much today. Let's dial it back for the next session. And you really have to like take mental notes, but actually take notes and say like what is happening in your sessions. Pay attention to numbers, which obviously when you're on an individual basis, it might be a little easier to keep track of the numbers and
Yeah, I mean, it's
seeing the
definitely
trends going
easier, and like
through.
you need
But
to rely on some of these guys more when you're in a group setting. Like when you're on
yeah,
your own and it's one person. That's one of the things I loved about being like on my own with Ian was that there was no like other thing to worry about. It was like he was
yeah,
the person I saw every single rep, I saw everything single set, and I got to tweak it on the spot. I got to see all his training. I knew when he wasn't training, when he wasn't feeling great, when he was feeling
hmm
amazing, and I was able to just tweak that stuff. When you're in a group setting, it's really hard. When you're not seeing their training, it's really hard because, I don't know how your experience was, but you can always ask like, "Hey, how was training today?" And they're like, "Oh, it was all right,"
yeah,
or it was like, "Yeah, it was great," and they're like exhausted. You don't really know because you can't see it. In the setting I had with Ian, I was able to see everything. I was able to see if there was like a little dip in performance. I was able to see if there
hmm
was a little dip in conditioning, a dip in strength, or he was just, struggling in some area. And I could make those changes like, almost immediately. So that's definitely a difference. But go ahead.
yeah. When I was working with a lot of the hockey teams, we'd get them when they were straight off the ice, or like when I was working with the in-season teams, they would, excuse me, they would have practice first, and then they'd shuffle into the weight room and work with us. So like a lot of the times, that's another thing too. You should be in contact with their coaches. So
Hmm.
like if
It's
you're
hard. It's
in
hard. It
fighting,
really
it could
is.
be yeah.
That's one of the
I would say
biggest
if you're
things I've struggled with. But go ahead.
yeah, if you're with fighters, you could be in contact with their fight coach or like just see like, hey, how's intensity been? Like trying to build a relationship with their sport coach is huge. And that's something where every time I would get a team in the weight room, I'd walk right up to the coach and be like, "Hey, how are they doing today? How have they been this week? What's their energy like?" Some days coaches are straight up honest. They're just like, "Dude, they're dead." Like they just need like maybe active recovery, which helps cuz like they can just tell you. Other times coaches will come in, which is a tricky part. They'll be like, "Oh, kill them today. They need it." And it's like, "All right, well, how are you guys feeling?" And you find out they're all dead. Coach just killed them in practice as a punishment, and that's how coach is seeing you should do it in the weight room. So, being able to have that judgment and look from that outside perspective as not a sport coach or a strength and conditioning coach, but just your inner athlete, as most of us were strength and conditioning. We were athletes at some point. So,
Yeah, and I think like the thing with the coaches is you really gotta like still develop your own eye
hmm
because I think if you just go off what the coach is saying, sometimes it's not 100% accurate. Like you said, sometimes they might have like ulterior, I wouldn't say ulterior motives, but like, they have
they're
like,
twiddling their fingers in the
well, it's just
corner.
like you said, there might be some like bias where it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
he didn't run hard today, like make him run hard. And it's just like, well,
That's the football
you know,
coaches for sure.
yeah, where it's like, you almost like that punishment mindset where, I think the sport coach can play a really important role. So it's important to have a good decision. But at the end of the day, your job as a strength conditioning coach is, and the best way I can put it is to make sure that when they go out to do their sport, they don't have to like second guess their body and they don't have to go out there and have any like lack of performance because of what they're doing with you. At
hmm
certain points, that's okay. If it's off season and the skill training isn't that high or there's no like immediate need to be putting a lot of effort into the sport, then like yeah, it's okay if we come in a little bit sore because we did a heavy squat or a heavy lift and we're getting that like strength stimulus. But in regards to like an athlete coming in and then, having to, you don't want to take away from what they're doing inside the sport, because obviously the sport is where they're going to get most of their training stimulus, right? And I think, to kind of like segue into this next point is I really think a lot of the problem that comes from S&C with coaches and a lot of the mistakes they make is literally that ego, where it's like, okay, well, I'm the
Mm-hmm.
S&C coach, so they got to get stronger, or they got to get faster, or they got to get more explosive. And while that's the case, like, you don't want to just like blindly train. You want to train with the purpose of like getting better. It is very hard to, in my opinion, like track some of these things that are actually like beneficial to an athlete. Obviously, you can track the strength numbers, you can track conditioning metrics, you can track, explosive numbers if you have like a VBT or some type of like speed tracker. But at the end of the day, like, you know, strength doesn't always equal success. And conditioning, usually, for the most part, as I've learned, is usually a better predictor of success than strength or speed is in a lot of cases. It's like if you can do, the skill longer than most people, you're probably going to benefit from that, and at least in fighting, win
Mm-hmm.
more. Obviously, strength is a huge factor for resistance, and strength is a huge factor in regards to like energy output. But conditioning allows us the opportunity to complete the game plan at a higher clip for longer periods of time, which, in my opinion, is what creates success specifically in MMA. And I think obviously as the sport changes, that sort of thing changes. But in my opinion, with the strength conditioning coach, like we really have to take a step back, because I think a lot of the mistakes come in that idea of like, oh, this is what I wrote, this is what we're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you really have to take a step back and say, what am I looking at? Who's in front of me? What did they do today? Like, because there's been so many times in my life as a strength conditioning coach where I worked hours to write a program. I was like, this is gonna be sick. Like, I can't wait to take clips.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is gonna be like a sick workout on Instagram. And then, the person walks in and they're just like, oh, like sparring was tough. Like, that was just a really tough session. And you're like, okay, like I got to put my ego aside. I
Mm-hmm.
got to put everything aside, and like we got to have a good session. We got to move. We got to make sure he's feeling better when he leaves here than when he got here, because, and especially early on, right? Like if there's a time, and a place for that, like, hey, we got to push through this,
Mm-hmm.
and that comes later, right? And specifically talking about fighters, you really don't want to be feeling that until like 3 weeks out. Like you really don't want to have that conversation of like, ugh, I don't know if I could do this today, until you're like 3 weeks out. Because if you're having that 7 weeks out, by the time you get to 3 weeks out, you're going to be miserable,
Mm-hmm.
In regards to the other sports, it's obviously like a year-round thing, so it's a lot different. Or there's season sports, like fighting's a year-round thing, so it's a lot different. But with the team sports like basketball, baseball, football, hockey, there's seasons. So it's like you're balancing that effort throughout the season. And that's really important for a coach, where it's like, hey, you got a long season of, say, 162 games of baseball, or 82 games of basketball, or 16 weeks of football. Like they're 4 to 6 month seasons where you're, going against the top guys and giving 100% effort every single day. And sometimes you just got to play it smart as a S&C coach. And sometimes it's literally just load management. It's like, hey, you
Mm-hmm.
just trained or you just had a hard game for 2 hours. Like, let's get a little lift in. Let's break that stimulus. Let's get that stimulus and let's get out. Right. And you have to be able to manage that, and you have to be able to kind of read these people. And sometimes the sport coaches don't always help. Sometimes the athletes don't really help, because they have that mentality of like, I need to do more. I need to get better. And I've had so much success with the athletes I've worked with by just being like, listen, trust me, we're going to do a little bit less right now, but we're going to have more in the tank when we actually need it. 8 weeks out, we shouldn't be doing these crazy double sessions. We shouldn't be doing, zero sleep and zero food and going to the gym. Like 8 weeks out is a time when we really want to take a step back and feel 100% good, feel injury free, feel excited to go train, feel focused on training, make sure we're moving, in the right direction, so that when the time comes towards the end, when we have those last 3 weeks, those you know, last very hard sessions, we have everything in the tank, so we're not losing anything or missing out on anything for the sport. Because again, like I said, I'll repeat myself, they're not going to win a fight, or they're not going to win their event bench pressing. They're going to win their event or their fight or whatever it is by being on the field or the track or the court and doing what they do best, which is playing the sport. And another thing is it's really important to understand the sport to a certain level that you are coaching, because there's a lot of stimulus that you get that you're almost just like double dipping on as an S&C coach if you don't really understand it, right? So again, fighting, it's very lactic. It's very like high stress, high energy, high output. So does it make sense to go do 5 rounds of sparring and then 10 rounds of bike sprints? Probably not, right? So it's like if you're already getting that stimulus in the training, let's what's the word I'm looking for? Like counteract, or there's another word for it.
Adjust. I don't know what you're looking for.
Like when you're like compliment. Let's complement
Oh,
that
okay.
with
Yeah, complement their sport training.
let's complement that with some nice easy aerobic stuff, right? Let's complement that with some mobility. Let's complement that with bringing our central nervous system down and finally getting into a relaxed state so they can really recover, right?
A
I
lot of
think
the
too
time,
many
that's what strength and conditioning is. We're just
yeah,
literally our job is to fill the buckets. We just need to
and that's
like if
it.
they're
I was
getting
getting to that.
a lot of volume, we need to maybe dial back a little bit. Like, and you'll notice that during the season, especially for sports stuff, like the buckets might fill a little faster over here, so you start to maybe fill the other ones. Give a
Mhm.
little attention to something else. Strength and conditioning is a lot of, like you said, the ego can get in the way, and sometimes it's strength and conditioning, and a lot of the times, especially when things get really tough, it's strength conditioning plus maintenance. And we're just trying to make sure that the athlete can perform at their best in their sport. Because again, if you're like you said, if you're taking away from their sport, like what's the point? Like we're just being a ball and chain on this athlete's potential. So our job is to literally complement their training as best as we can in the weight room.
Yeah, and I think again, as a coach, I know sometimes, and I think what happens is obviously I had a very unique experience in being a strength conditioning coach, like a solo on my own strength conditioning coach, working with elite athletes. A lot of these guys do have pressures from the top to show success in like numbers, right? And it's like, you're working for a school or you're working for a company, and these companies are making a lot of money from some of these people, and they want to keep making that money, so they want to show success in some way, shape, or form. So they almost force you to be like, hey, show us some number increases. And that's why you get a lot of these coaches who are like power clean, squat, deadlift, and they're like, show the vertical go up, but then all the other numbers drop, their movement quality goes down, just so they can show that, like, yes, everyone got stronger, right? And that's such
Mm-hmm.
a big problem inside the coaching industry. And part of where I'm going with like this whole ego thing is we end up kind of like taking the name too serious with like strength conditioning, and we end up missing out on a lot of the fun of being a great coach, which is exploring movement, right? And I think a lot of these guys can gain so much from exploring movement because there's just so much that they haven't explored as an
Mm-hmm.
athlete, right? And you see some of these people, and they're some of the most athletic people you'll ever meet, right? And you see them do basic stuff like touch their toes or squat or crawl, and they just can't do it. And it's like, but you can jump over somebody, like you can, do a double backflip, but you can't like crawl, or you
Yeah.
can't squat, or you can't like bend down and touch your toes correctly. It's like these basic patterns that we almost like overlook. And we've talked about this a lot in other seasons and episodes, where it's like coaches currently are just so far off the track of what they should be doing that they're like, skipping all the basics and fundamentals that these kids really need in these high level sports, because a lot of them are so specialized um and so basically like doing the same thing, these repetitive motions. They need some variety in their training.
Mm-hmm.
They need some lateral movement. They need some backwards walking or running. They need to bend their spine a little bit and twist their spine a little bit and get through some, uncomfortable ranges of motion. They need to be kind of doing that in a progressive way that then leads them to going back out onto the field and feeling better, or feeling, and we've talked about this a lot, but I think one of the biggest mistakes that coaches make on top of this is they try to bring the field into the weight room. And
Oh
that's
my!
just
Don't even get
like,
me started, bro.
and there's so much that's wrong with this concept of like, oh, well, if a punch, like this is my favorite one, is like, I want to get a faster punch, so I'm going to put a band on my fist and go like this a bunch of times super fast. And it's like, it looks like it feels like it, but it's not it, right? Like we have to break down what's actually going down in these movement patterns, what's actually occurring at the shoulder, what's actually occurring in some of these ranges of motion, and then work on those, in unison somehow or in isolation. That's going to improve the whole movement. But I think when these coaches try to bring the field into the weight room and they try to make things look like it does on the field, there's benefits to it to a certain extent, right? I'm not going to, like, there is things that do help. And it's like, a lot of this is a mental game too. And a lot of these athletes feel that way. They're like, hey, if it looks like the field, I feel like I'm getting better. And you do have to you have to teeter that line as a coach where it's like, hey, how can I get these guys to do what I want while also mentally being bought in and feeling the progress they're getting. But I think that I'm sure you're going to say something.
Yeah.
But I just want to finish it with one thing is even in that balance, we have to not forget that like the field is not the weight room, and then the weight room is not the field either. And that they're going to get a lot of things from the field. And like Jerry just said, because I think that's the way I was going to sum it anyways, we have to fill those buckets inside of the weight room to make sure it's a balanced package that they're giving and getting everything that they need.
So you made two really good points there. One being like doing what you have to do in order to make them perform their best. And obviously we're doing the filling of the buckets.
Mm-hmm.
And then you mentioned bringing the sport into the weight room. These two things, and I'm going to kind of go in depth really quick on them, are a big issue that happens from the start of the pitch for strength and conditioning for that team. So this is something when I was contracted at a high school, I was there, the head strength and conditioning coach at a high school near my house back home in New York. And when I went in, basically at the start of every season, we'd have new coaches, new sports. When they haven't met me yet, I had to go in. They did their whole meeting, and then at the very end, it's like, all right, we're going to have Jerry come up, and he's going to go through the strength and conditioning program, what he's offering, all this stuff. And this was my sell to the coaches, like, definitely get them in the weight room, like, this is going to help. And obviously, you have to pitch the idea, like, they're going to get stronger, they're going to get faster, they're going to get more powerful, which is going to translate into a stronger, faster, more powerful athlete in the sport. When you're making that pitch, you have a lot of people mistake the role of strength and conditioning right from there, because some of these coaches, especially ones like football, might understand a little bit more for the most part. Sometimes like the more odd sports that typically don't have strength and conditioning as much recently, they're kind of coming up more like swimming, field hockey, stuff that you really wouldn't think about too much. Those coaches can sometimes say like, once you're in the thick of the season and things are really intense, they have a lot of meets or games or whatever, the coach is like, hey, I noticed their numbers aren't really going up on this lift or that lift. And that's where we make the argument, well, they're not going to win this championship with a bench press or a squat or a deadlift. Yes, we want them to get stronger, but at this point, our job is to complement them in their sport and make sure that they're getting the most out of it. Along with that, sport specific is a term that is used a lot when strength and conditioning coaches sell sport coaches on their training. Mm-hmm. They say, now this is sport specific training. And if they say that, what they mean is by training in these movement patterns, moving laterally, moving on all these different planes of motion, they're going to be able to translate into better movement on the field, creating a stronger, more well-rounded athlete. Injury prevention involved. And one of the bigger things with sport specific, the reason I hate that term is because, again, those coaches hear sports specific and they're like, oh, we're going to bring a lacrosse ball and a lacrosse stick into the weight room and we're going to cradle it back and forth as we're moving. That is not the goal. They get all of that on the field. Why the hell would we fill that bucket more? So yeah, exactly. I saw this drill where this one coach was like, up, 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 and he's doing like a little noise to get them to go. And these girls are cradling a lacrosse stick and they're like low squatting. And they're kind of like duck walking forward with the ball, duck walking backward to the left, to the right. And then he's like, again. And they go for it. And it's like, dude, you're in a weight room. You got a small, like 10 by 10 turf. What the hell are you doing with these girls? You're wasting their time. Yeah. So it's important to, like, in your sell to the sport coaches, make sure that when you say it's like if you mention sport specificity and how it's going to translate into their sport, into better movement, better performance, you touch on that. Like, we are not bringing your sport into the weight room, but what we do in the weight room will complement what we do in the sport. And you could even use the filling of the buckets as your main example for that, but letting them know right from the get-go that you'll also have weeks where it's going to be maintenance. And our goal is to make sure that if they're having a tournament this weekend and they come in on a Monday, we're not going to make them do a super high volume conditioning set of sprints or whatever agility back and forth for the day for like your plyos and stuff. We might have lighter stuff for that day. And the reason is why is because if too much volume is happening in the weight room and on the field, court, ice, whatever, or ring, that's when injuries happen because the recovery piece is huge. So like selling the maintenance, selling what sport specificity actually is going to help you as a coach get the buy-in from the sport coaches as well.
Well, I think also it's like, and how most people are in today's world, unfortunately, is they just want to keep their job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whatever's being thrown at them, they'll just agree with it. They're just like,
Yep.
cool, just keep paying me. I'll do what you ask.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's a shame because it does hurt the industry because you do get people look up to certain people, and like when they're doing something just to keep getting paid, it's not good because it's not what they actually believe in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be like a thought, a belief, you know, whatever it might be, an action in regards to like training, a lot of this stuff isn't what they really believe. And if you really ask them, you know, and off the record, they'd probably be like, yeah, like, do I need to be doing this? No, but like that's what the school wants, or that's what the team wants, or that's what the parent wants, and like they're paying me, and
Mm-hmm.
it sucks. And I think like one of the things I enjoyed about not having to do that was like I got to sit down with the people I work with and be like, listen, this is what I believe. This is how I think you're going to find success. And this is how I think I'm going to improve your performance. And these are my metrics. You know, are you feeling good? Are you looking good? You know, do you feel like when you go out and you're trained, you're, you know, the other aspects besides some of these things, like, are you memorizing movement patterns more? Are you remembering these chain sequences like in jujitsu? Are you remembering how to finish these moves? Are you noticing tactics or keys or things in the ring? Because those are all, to me, like a symbol of like, are you recovering? Are you getting what you need out of training? And to me, it's just like the most important thing that goes along with filling these buckets. It's just like everything Jerry just explained. It's like selling yourself properly and understanding like your own philosophy of what do I really think performance looks like? What's my philosophy? What's my desired outcome? And as a coach, what am I going to do to get us there? Right. And you explain that and you go from there. But I think, you know, to kind of get into the hot take of the day, I also think a lot of coaches, and I've been victim to this on occasion, I think. I really do believe I don't fall too much into this bucket. But I think we all take credit as a strength conditioning coach for helping people. But I think a lot of people get finished products as clients or athletes and that have been training for 12, 13, 14, 15 years. They get them and they're taking credit for, you know, years of work, right? And while that's helpful, and I do think, like, for example, I've helped a lot of people correct bad habits, you know, whether it be in the way they think they should train or the way they should cut weight or the way that they should peak or the way that they should, you know, manage their training camps, whether it be, you know, the actual MMA sessions, because I'm someone who likes to sit down and really like fully look at someone's schedule and understand like, hey, I know you just look at this as like sparring, but to me, I look at this as like you just did 10 rounds of 10 on the assault bike. Like you're getting that stimulus. So it's like, I don't need to do this again. Right. On a light jujitsu technical day where you're not really getting a high heart rate, cool. Let's do some aerobic training there. Let's keep that stimulus low. On those high days, let's get a nice high lift in, keep those stress days high, and let's build that recovery into the training week. But what happens is I think a lot of these coaches, you know, for example, I see this a lot in like the combine field, like the NFL combine, you know, these coaches are getting people who are 22, 23 in the prime of their career, you know, training them for 3 months. They're hitting a PR on the speed, the 40-yard dash. And they're like, look what I did. Look what I did. Look what we did. come join. And it's like, I get it. You're trying to build your business and you're trying to kind of like go through that thing. But, and it's not to say you don't help, because I don't want this to come as like a hating thing, because obviously as strength conditioning coaches, we help a ton, right? But I think to do it in the right way, you do it in a way that allows the athlete to just be themselves, right? Like I had this with Amanda. And I think one of the things with Amanda was the best fighter in the ring when she stepped in there every single time. Skill for skill, whatever you want to call it, she was the best fighter in there. Whether her body was going to allow her to do that was a different question, right? And that's where her thing came in. It was whether she was injured, it was whether she was healthy, it was whether she, ran herself to the bone during camp. And when she didn't run herself to the bone during camp, she smashed Juliana. She smashed Irene. And I'm not going to say that because, again, Amanda was a finished product when she came to me. Like, she was who she was. But there was still things that we were able to tweak. And there was ways I was able to fit myself into her career and teach her, like, hey, right now is not the time for that. Right now is not the time to do a double session when you haven't slept. Like, pick one, let's do it. Or if you want to do both, because that's going to make you feel better, I'm going to adjust, right? Because the sport is the most important. And then I'm going to adjust what I need to do to fit in. Because I know one of my favorite things about strength conditioning is that from the minute the person walks into the door to the minute they leave, I can auto regulate. I can change things. I can change things from the time it takes us to start the workout, to the time in between sets, to the time in between reps, to the barbell, to the dumbbell, to the position. I can change every single thing whenever I want, because they trust me, because I've built that rapport with them, and because I know what's best in those moments. So that's really important, is understanding that and really kind of taking that in, where it's like, hey, I know you want to really train hard, so that's fine. Let's go do that. But when you come with me, I need 100% trust, and I'm going to tweak this, right? And they may be like, hey, well, it seems like an easy session. It's like, well, it is, because you just did that. Mm-hmm. So like, trust me. And then they get to the fight night, they win, they feel amazing, and they're like, oh, okay, great. That was awesome, right? And there's a reason why I've done it with so many people and it's worked. And it's like, a lot of people just push the gas pedal on these guys, and they're like, you're athletes, you got to push. And they do. And I think a lot of them do. And I think a lot of them get pushed into the ground because of it. And they miss out on a lot of really good training time. And at the end, they miss out a lot of years on their career. I think they miss out on a lot of years at the end of their career because they run themselves into the ground. And that's really it. So I think, like I said, the hot take is just like, most S&C coaches get these finished products and they almost hurt them, really. Like they almost like ruin a lot of it because they try to take credit. And in reality, it's like, hey, I'm here helping you in your career. I think my methods work. I think they help and they improve people's performance, but you have to do it at all levels, right? And I think some of these guys have never done it at a level like, and that's what I was proud with Ian, was that like I was with Ian from the start, like his first fight in the UFC, and built him up and helped him kind of like revamp the way he trained and revamped his conditioning, and had almost 4 years of training with him, which is, at the end of that, I can say I can take some credit for how he is physically, right? Amanda was a year. I think Amanda, I got her healthy. I think that was another thing where, again, I'm not like trying to like pat myself in the back, but it's like there's things that I did, whereas like Amanda didn't really need any performance boost. She just needed to get healthy. It was like she just needed to move well and learn that, like, hey, my body can feel good and I can step into the ring 100% confident. And look what she did. 6 knockdowns, wins the belt back. And, basically, I forgot what it was. It was like 50-43'd Juliana. Like, that's insane. And I don't know. I'd have to consider it. But Ian had a 30-24, and then Amanda had a 50-43 or 50-44. I forgot what it is, but been a part of 2 of the biggest beatdown rounds in history of UFC. So, but yeah, so I think that's my hot take. And Jerry, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I didn't have my own hot take, but I do want to build on yours. And this stems from when you do have those people who shine, don't let that prevent you from changing the way you train people in the future. Mm-hmm. I will say I worked at a gym for 2 weeks for free in Colorado because they required 2 weeks first before they were like, yo, you just come in, we'll have you work, and then after that we'll get you on schedule. And they had like one or maybe two examples. Like one person went professional in their sport, the other person was an Olympian, and they were like, "We train Olympians." That was like what they would say. And I shit you not, all they did was rings, agility ladders, hurdles, and that's it. I have never been less impressed with a professional facility than this gym. And when I tell you that they will never forget that Olympian or their professional athlete, which by the way, from Colorado, if you're playing a sport from the get-go at a young age and you are training your ass off, you're going to adapt and be a freak of nature in that altitude.
Yeah.
And when you see people who are really good at a young age, it like you can tell like they're going to be an athlete cuz some people just have it. And what happened was they started working with these people when they were in like middle school and they were doing rings and hurdles 3 times a week. And they were like, "We train Olympians. Look at where we got this person." And they definitely took credit for everything that they did. If you get somebody who breaks through, look at all the factors that play into it. Sometimes they're a freak of nature. Sometimes it is your training. But sometimes, even when you have the training dialed and they're a freak of nature, you can still learn a lot from what happened there, and you could transfer it to other people. Because for the hundreds of kids that went in that door, that one Olympian and one professional football player seemed to be the one thing on their wall because they train Olympians.
Yeah.
But
Well,
what
I think
that gym is.
like again, I don't want to sit here and say that the strength conditioning coaches can't take credit because that's not what I'm saying at
No,
all.
not at all.
What I'm saying is, it's just like, you know, if you're working with someone from the ground up, then yeah, like that's
Yeah.
awesome. Like if you're working with someone for a really long time, you should, because that
Mm-hmm.
shows your system works. But if you had someone for 3 months and they came in, like if LeBron came through for 3 months and then, he was still healthy at the end of 3 months, it's like you did your job. Like there's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, like
Well, that's why I'm
you did
saying
your
like
job. You kept him healthy.
if you start with somebody like from the start and they go all the way and they make it to their sport and they're killing it, but you're training thousands of other people in the following years and you don't have that same Olympian, maybe it's time to reevaluate, like
But
it's
also, like the only thing I would say is like,
well, obviously
those
not
guys
everyone's
are
going to be an
a dime a
Olympian.
dozen. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's not, or they're not a dime a dozen. That's the
Yeah.
complete opposite. Sorry,
I
they're
knew what you meant.
yeah, they're one in a million. So it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when you have those people, obviously everyone wants to latch onto that and kind of be like, hey, look what I do, look what I've done. But I think it's just important to understand, like, you had a piece of their history, like, or their career.
Yeah.
You help them, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think that's the biggest thing. As long as you're helping them and you're not hurting them, that's the most important thing. And obviously, like, your system works. If you're getting that type of clientele, you're doing something right, right? And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
something to take into account, you know. But I think sometimes we see a lot of things from these people who are just a little bit like, maybe intentionally unaware that they're like great athletes, and it's not always just what they're doing. It's like, hey, you did your job, you kept them healthy, you allowed them to do what they do. But yeah, I think that's it for me for this. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think the last two things I'll put onto this, just kind of to summarize this, like the drill. I want you guys to our next segment, the drill. Like, I want you guys to go back, and if you do work with athletes, kind of think about that. Like when someone walks in, are you adapting to what they need, or are you really forcing your hand on them? Like, this is what I wrote, this is what we're doing, or are you actually taking into account like what's going on? And if you are training athletes, like how much are you blending in what they're actually doing on the other side in the actual sport into what you're doing? And are you actually filling the buckets, or are you just saying like, oh, this is what I wrote, this is what we're going to do? Right. And I think it's a really important question to ask as a coach and something to dive into if not. And I think this is the time to dive into it, because my last thing for the influence pick, for the thing to do this week, is to go check out the BG Perform yearly coaching audit. If you haven't listened to that episode, go check it out. It was the last episode on our second season. And I do think it's that time of year to start reflecting and start really figuring out like what's going on in your career. Are you happy? Are you satisfied with your clients? Are you getting the results you want? Are you enjoying the clients you're working with? And everything is going to be laid out on this sheet that I created for the BG Perform coaching yearly coaching audit. There's 11 or 12 questions on there. Take the time to answer it. Take the time to kind of write this out and really figure out, are you where you want to be with your career? And if not, what can you do to change it? And if you have any questions on that, reach out to myself or Jerry, and we'll definitely take some time to take you through it. And yeah, I think that's it.
My influence pick is for you to do that, but also find a friend who is a coach and have them do that too.
Brother.
Spread the word. Spread the word.
Brother.
Brother.
Me? No. Him? Yes.
All
right. I liked it. It's a great episode. I appreciate you guys for sticking around. And thank you. And thank you for listening this far. And welcome to season 3 of the BG Perform podcast. We will see you guys next time. Peace.